എന്താ ചെയ്യാ കുറെ നേരമായിട്ട് Good morning to all. Veena madam.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear? Am I audible? Okay.
Yes. 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 Veena madam. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning all.
Sir, Pavitra sir. Good morning sir.
Yeah, okay, I'm here.
Good morning. Good morning to all.
Good morning. Okay, our students are there. One batch full students are there. Already they joined. Third year BSc nursing students.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, proceed.
ഇന്നലെ പിന്നെ ഇത് കേട്ടില്ലായിരുന്നു.
Mornings are so lovely, pleasant beginnings of a bright day, filled with new hopes and aspirations for a new feel of the day. Wishing everyone a very good morning and warm welcome to today's webinar session. I'm Anagha CK, a second year MSc Nursing student, privileged to host the events held by our institution. Ethos means the guiding beliefs of a person, group, or organization. Today, MSc Nursing students of College of Nursing Talasheri presents before you a webinar on ethical and legal issues in nursing. Participants, a gentle reminder, please mute your mic during the ongoing sessions. To have God who speaks in the silence of the heart is always miraculous. Prayer is simply talking to God and is a spiritual transaction with the creator of heaven and earth. Now, we can invoke God's blessings by a silent prayer. Heaven and earth. Now, we can invoke God's blessings by a silent prayer. Heaven and earth. Now, we can invoke God's blessings by a silent prayer. Welcoming is part and parcel of any gathering that gives proper way of beginning of an event. A warm and sincere welcome gives a sense of caring and makes people feel appreciated. Now, I welcome Ms. Shruti Pavanan, second year MSc Nursing student, to deliver the welcome speech. Over to you, Shruti.
Thank you, Anagha. Good morning, one and all, dear distinguished guests, excellencies, all nurses, teachers, and beloved students. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this webinar on ethical and legal issues in nursing. organized by faculties and students of College of Nursing, Talasheri. It's a privilege to honor this excellent audience who have gathered here for the session. I'm very grateful to welcome the most dynamic, quick-witted personality, who's none other than Dr. Swapna Jose, Professor Krum, Principal, College of Nursing, Talasheri, the Chief Organizer of today's webinar. We welcome you, ma'am. Next, we have the eminent personality who is very conscientious and assiduous. We are so excited, proud, and privileged to have Major Beena CA, Chief Nursing Officer, Bidhi Memorial Hospital, Calicut, the resource person of today's webinar. On behalf of College of Nursing, Talasheri, I wholeheartedly welcome you, ma'am. We have the most resourceful, efficient, and diligent person, Ms. Sindhuka Matthew, Assistant Professor, HOD of Medical Surgical Nursing, College of Nursing, Talasheri. We welcome you, ma'am. Every thought you produce, anything you say, any action you do, it bears your signature. I welcome Mrs. Manjula Casey, Associate Professor, College of Nursing, Talasheri. I welcome you, ma'am. Now, it's indeed a great pleasure to welcome Mr. Agil US, Assistant Professor, Department of Medical Nursing, College of Nursing, Talasheri. With his guidance, support, and his tiring effort, we could make this webinar come true. I welcome you, sir. Last but not the least, I welcome all clinical nurses, teachers, and students to this webinar session. Hope this session will be a fruitful one to each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shruti. Next, I would like to invite our beloved principal, Dr. Swapna Jose, for the inaugural address. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning to all. Respected dignitaries, my colleagues, and dear students. College of Nursing, Talasheri, 12th batch MSc Nursing students ആണ് ഇന്നത്തെ ഈ വെബിനാർ ഓർഗനൈസ് ചെയ്തിരിക്കുന്നത്. And the topic of the webinar is ethical and legal issues in nursing. So in the current situation, we know that the COVID pandemic is on the rise and the hospitals are getting with the patients. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ nurses വളരെയധികം stressed ആണ്, mainly because of the staff shortage, lack of the resources. So all this may give rise to the legal suits as well as the ethical dilemmas. So I congratulate our MSc Nursing students for choosing this topic, which is very relevant to the current scenario. So I would like to share a few slides regarding the need of this, the ethical and legal aspects in nursing. So can you see my slide? Okay, the consumers are the patients with complex needs. Can you see the slides? Okay, the consumers are the patients with complex needs. With increased awareness of healthcare facilities, and the Consumer Protection Act, patients are becoming greater aware of the rights. Nurses also have now expanded role. Issues which seem to be feasible and ideal may become practice with the change of time. These issues are based on the base for the future trends in care. So how to show the professionalism in nursing? So we are the advocate of for patients. We have to communicate effectively, work as a team, and always keep a positive attitude and deliver top quality care and always maintain your integrity. And what are the skills the nursing professionals should have? That is, they should have the leadership qualities, critical thinking, adaptability, as well as the conflict resolutions. So why nurses must be aware of the legal and ethical aspects of nursing? Nursing is a vital part of the healthcare system, and nurses are described as the heartbeat of the healthcare. Nurses are now being and will continue to be given increased responsibility, thereby increasing their exposure to lawsuits. Nurses must know the rights and obligations in interacting with the patients, families of patients, other nurses, and other healthcare practitioners. Nurses are expected to function within the legal legislation, legal statutes relevant to the profession and practice setting and professional standards. So nurses also come across a lot of ethical dilemmas. That is, too many patients but scarce resources, then don't resuscitate. That is, for a cancer patient who is terminally ill, should you resuscitate or not? That's one of the ethical dilemmas. Then euthanasia or the mercy killing. Are we for it or against it? Then treatment of terminally ill patients like end-stage cancer, HIV, etc. And also the rights of psychiatric patients. So what is the need for nursing ethics? That is, it helps the students but registered nurses to practice ethically, help the nurse to understand, to identify the ethical issues in her workplace, protect the patient rights and dignity, provide care with possible risk to the nurse's health, staffing patterns that limit the patient's access to nursing care. Ethical reasoning also help the nurses to respond to ethical conflicts, help to differentiate right-wrong behavior, guide for a professional behavior, help the teachers to plan the education, prevent below standard practice. These ethical theories help the nurses to develop a respect and dignity for people and their autonomous choices, and to practice confidentiality, whereby information is shared only with permission. So we have the ICN Code of Ethics, which will guide us in practicing our profession. So nurses must have a knowledge regarding the laws and ethics to protect themselves from becoming involved in a situation where legal liability could arise. So with this, I conclude. And അതോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ ഈ വെബിനാർ ഉദ്ഘാടനം ചെയ്തതായി അറിയിക്കുന്നു. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, with utmost respect, I would like to invite Ms. Sindhu K. Matthew, Assistant Professor, HOD, Medical Surgical Nursing, College of Nursing, Talasheri, to give an overview of today's webinar. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, Anaka. And thank you, organizers. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session. I am here to give you an overview about the ethical and legal issues in nursing around the world. Actually, the organizers have kept an app named Ethos. It's a Greek word meaning character. And basically, the character was the only meaning of ethics in all the nursings. But nursing perspectives have changed, and we will discuss. Madam Beena will discuss about that later. So, but before going into the details of the legal and ethical issues, so let me draw your attention to some of the news bites recently published. So one thing is nurse arrested after patient dies due to wrong medication, Hindustan Times. So in December 29, 2021, Mumbai edition. So another one is 2 male nurses arrested for selling one patient remdesivir to another patient for Rs 15,000 for a single dose. So can you just imagine? And these are some of the common news we'll see or will come up in news or in the newspapers. But let me draw your attention to some common scenarios you and me used to see in the clinical scenarios or in the hospitals. So the first one is you're short of staff, you're all overloaded in a shift in an ICU. And what do? You, out of the pressure, you're stressed. Out of the pressure, you gave a wrong dose of medication to your patient. So it can happen, right? So that's an ethical dilemma. Or you and your colleague has gone to a patient to start an IV line. So, but by being with the patient, while being there, so instead of talking to the patient or observing the patient, you are talking about some hospital gossip or hospital politics. Is it good? So that's another ethical dilemma. So which unknowingly happen, and always day-to-day life it happens. And you are talking to a patient and your team leader, newly appointed maybe. So the team leader comes in and tells you that, okay, give more sulfate to bed number 4, Mr. So-and-so. So is it good? You are breaching the confidentiality of that patient, and many more ethical issues that Madam Beena will discuss with you, that thing. Another common thing which Indian nurses are not aware about is that imagine an ICU in the night shift, and you have finished all your usual routine works and the patients are calm, everybody's going to sleep. And what do? You watch your videos in your phone, or you talk, or you have some food. So, but everything has noise, and poor patient is trying to catch some sleep, and you're doing something ethically wrong thing. Or very simple thing, which I used to see in the wards, is writing in red letters or reading that HIV positive portion. So you are just breaching the confidentiality of the patient, which handles with you. You know, the patient hands over the confidentiality with you, and you are just breaching it by writing and letting the world know that the person is HIV positive. So instead, you know, you can just treat everybody as with all the precautions, so universal precautions. So instead of that, writing this as ethical breaching. So another thing, as when, you know, yelling at the colleagues and gossiping about colleagues, that's another ethical breaching and ethical dilemma. So which, you know, you never know that if the victim thinks that he or she has to go to court, you will be caught and you will be charged and you will be booked by the legal system in India. So that is another thing. Nobody does that, but at most, you know, it can happen. And when you resuscitate, have you ever thought that what happens to the what is patient's DNR status? So whether the patient is having, whether the patient about that. So have you ever thought about the DNR status of the patient, or whether the patient is on DNR signed or not? So Indians, why are we not sued? You know, we don't see, or we don't hear a lot about the nurses getting sued by the patients or patient relatives. But why is it not happening? Because the Indians, poor Indians, are not much concerned about the patients, right? Or they are not aware about the patients, right? And if you are with the same kind of behaviors in a Western country practicing, you'll be caught, you'll be punished, or you'll be jailed. So you're the essence of the seminar. So how can you be protected, knowingly protected, act within the ethical code of ethics or code of conduct in the profession and laws of the country? Be aware about the laws of country. So that is the essence of the significance of the seminar. And we have got something called ethics, are the moral principles that govern how the people or the group will behave. Usually. So in olden days, what happened is, from the inception of the nursing, we thought it is a loyalty, high morality. It's a loyalty, physician loyalty. I'm ashamed of talking about that, that if you see a physician on one floor, so all the nurses will get up, and instead, if the patient is talking to you something serious, you will say that I have another patient. So high moral character, that is another one, and obedience, the blind obedience. Are you with that? These are the old school principles, and now the nursing has come. Nursing has some other, the dimensions of nursing have changed a lot. Nurses are an advocate right now. Nurses are a researcher right now. And, the nurses have set up their own settings with the patient education and patient advisors. The private firms, you can see that where you'll get advice on the legal aspects by a nurse. So that improvement we have to adopt, and you have to see, and we have to change. Once the cap over the head is gone, all these concepts have to go, the physician loyalty especially. And the nursing profession has evolved, as I said, and it's a non-negotiable ethical standards right now, non-negotiable ethical standards. And it's an expression of the nursing's own understanding of its commitment to the society. So what would I like to say is the profession. So in short, in a nutshell, the profession, current nursing ethics represents advances in technology, societal changes, as I said before, expansion of nursing practice with advanced practice roles. Then the research, education. So almost, if you take education department, nursing education department right now, more than 50% has got a doctoral degree. So then still we are violating the ethical principles because we are not aware about it. Consciously, we are not practicing that. Health policy and administration, we are everywhere, at least for the name, even everywhere in the governmental setup, we are there. But it has to be strengthened. That's another point. But the ethical considerations or the ethical principles have to be kept when you are holding the positions in all these situations, and builds and maintains healthy work environments. So dilemmas, the Madam Beena will discuss with regard to the patient care, the decision making. The patient care, you can have a lot of things, and the decision making is when a patient about to die, when you're putting the patient on NORAD for 10, 15, then 25, and making the patient to hard to beat, even the patient is ready to go. So then you have a dilemma to work along with that, right, with the team, and you have a different opinion. So are you strong enough or bold enough to tell it in the multidisciplinary team that, okay, I don't feel it is okay to have NORAD and keep the patient alive, when all other parameters are saying us to leave the patient and let him die peacefully. So are we there yet? But in foreign countries, we are there. In the nurses and integral part, and nurses ready to say that, and nurses' voices are heard and always appreciated everywhere. And we, the nursing fraternity, have to try and get in there. So that's the point of having such webinars, and just integrate and get into, grab into yourself and be empowered and enlightened and go back to your work. Another one is your teamwork, how to behave in a team and how can you extract the all the abilities and the strengths of everyone. Some people have come from a very good background and their moral and ethical values are very good. So they go in a straight line and they don't have, they will not breach the patient rights. But what about others? You have to make them, or you have to modify them into your track. So that's our teamwork again. So we have the resolutions already. So that's why every country has their own code of ethics, code of conduct. And, the ANA started it having from 1959. Then every country has followed that. And India has code of ethics, and we used to give during graduation ceremony with a lot of expectation that our students will follow this, and how far they have followed it as a question. So such seminars will help us to strengthen and repeated, repeated reminders can make a lot of changes. And, we have professional help and professional protecting laws available. So that is another point, and which we have to be aware about that. If you are gone into a situation and all other health team, the authority and everyone is telling you that you're in trouble, that you should know that what is a protecting law and stick to that. Don't be weak and be strong. You are a professional and you are a strong profession. You are belonging to a strong profession which has codes. So with this, let me conclude, and we would be very happy to hear you, ma'am, more in-depth dimensions about legal and ethical issues from Madam Beena. Let me welcome ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I request Mrs. Manjula Casey, Associate Professor, College of Nursing, Talasheri, to introduce the chief speaker of today's webinar, Major Beena CA. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Anaka. Very good morning to everyone who joined here for the webinar on the topic of ethical and legal issues in nursing. It gives me an immense pleasure to introduce the eminent guest speaker of today's session, Honorable Major Beena CA. Major Beena CA is the Chief Nursing Officer at Baby Memorial Hospital, Calicut. Currently, she is pursuing a postgraduate diploma in medical law and ethics from National Law School of India University. She has more than 25 years of nursing experience at various certification from Alfred Monash University, Australia, and she has been a resource person for various institutional and state level conferences. I am very sure the upcoming session will benefit you by enhancing your knowledge on ethical and legal issues in nursing, helping to make you good judgments and decisions, understanding the best clinical practices that protect your license and position, improving the quality of care and reducing the risk. I wholeheartedly invite Madam Beena to continue this session. Over to you, Madam. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's my privilege and pleasure to be here to discuss this topic. I would say discuss rather than taking. So both previous speakers, Dr. Sapna and Ms. Sindhu, they have done half of my job. and it was a really good overview and session. And I'll be just taking up rest of the things, more concentrating in the clinical field, because you all are students. You are going to come out into the hospital practicing based on your license. And so I'll be discussing more on what are the terms, what are the laws, and how do you protect yourself. Why should nurses comes under certain laws? As Ms. Sindhu said, we know we in India, the lawsuits against nurses are very less. Why? Because compared to European countries and other countries, because we know our poor Indians are ignorant about the laws that protects them. So with that, thank you. I would like to start the presentation. Can I?
Ma'am, is there any technical issue?
Yeah, just let my out.
Ma'am, it's okay, ma'am. Then we'll continue over here, ma'am.
I just
Can we do
would
it, ma'am?
like, yeah.
Okay, okay. Okay.
ഇത് ഇങ്ങോട്ട് ഷെയർ ചെയ്യണോ?
Madam,
Okay, 1 minute.
madam, can you share the screen from here?
1 minute, just a minute.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. Madam, I think it's a trouble. Can you please start from beginning, ma'am? Over there in
Okay.
the left corner.
Okay. Yeah.
Madam,
Just a second.
okay, ma'am. Madam, shall we start, ma'am?
Bina madam, are you ready? Bina madam? And you can continue with the slide is visible.
Madam, Bina madam, mute, ma'am. You are muted, ma'am. Ma'am, can you please unmute, ma'am?
Just a second, we'll start now.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Can you see it?
Ma'am, the screen is visible, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry for the inconvenience, technical issues. So, okay, let me start. I'll be discussing more of the clinical related issues in legal terms and ethical terms. Ethical review has already been done. Now, when India got freedom in 1947, so we made constitutional laws with some preamble. The preamble of Indian Constitution states the objective of the preamble was justice, equality, liberty, freedom for all Indian citizens. So every profession, not only profession, every individual is governed or ruled by certain laws in our country, like any other countries. So Indian Constitution made rules and regulations to control the behavior and protect the rights and justice of every individual that lives in this country. So that was the preamble of Indian Constitution. So under this constitution, so even our nursing profession is controlled and regulated by certain rules and regulations. So what are the legal and ethical system in our country? Why should we come under the legal system? We know that nursing is a service sector. Every hospital, doctor service, nursing, all that is a service sector. And consumers are our clients. So whoever consumes any kind of service or goods, they are called consumers. So in that way, all our patients are supposed to be consumers of our service. So every consumers have to be protected. So that is why even the nursing is under certain laws, so that the consumers of our service are protected under various articles of Constitution, like Article 23, 21, 19. All this says right for health, right for dignity, right for personal justice. So nursing as a licensed profession has legal duty and obligation towards individuals and society. So there are certain standards for nursing based on various ethical principles. Let us see what are those ethical principles. So law and legal system. The law is a system of rules created and enforced to social or governmental institutions to regulate behavior, as I already said. So what are the sources of these laws which regulate individual and profession? So these are, it means from where does these laws or regulations comes? The sources of laws in our country can be statutory laws or legislative laws, administrative laws, and common laws. These are the three type of laws where each and every rules and regulations emerges. What is the statutory laws or legislative laws? These are the laws or the rules that is created by our legislation or the government bodies to control certain agencies, their rights, to control their rights, to limit the boundaries, to regulate the authorities with which an agency act. Example, like our nursing council. So the rights and authorities of our council, state council, is regulated by this legislative laws or statutory laws. Next is administrative laws. So what is administrative laws? So administrative laws determine the powers and duties, means the boundaries of the powers. Legislative laws determines what are the laws, how should they act, how should the council act, how should they behave, how should a nurse behave. And the administrative laws determine the boundaries, the limitations, and what they can do and what they should not do. Others are common law. Common law means these laws are evolved from the previous decisions of judges. So from the court, like Supreme Court or High Court. So the judges cannot act in different ways in different situations. If once they have decided some way on some case, so they have to continue it. So that becomes a law. So that is called, that kind of laws are, or decisions or rules are evolved from the previous judgment of court judgments or decisions of the court. So these are the main sources of law. And now, since we have all these laws and regulations are based on certain principles of ethics. Ethics or ethos that has already been discussed. It is nothing but it is all about right and wrong. And this right and wrong are decided based on few principles. What are these principles that govern nursing, especially? So it is autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, and fidelity. And there are few more like veracity, all that, confidentiality. But mainly these five are the ethical principles that govern the nursing profession. Now, what is autonomy? Autonomy, individual have autonomy, professions have autonomy. That is, achieving autonomy means ultimate goal, that is transactional analysis. Being autonomous means being self-governing. Every individual has the right to determine what is good for them, what is bad for them. So, likewise, our consumers, our patients also has the right to determine what they need, what kind of a treatment they require, or which physician to be seen, or they have all right to refuse or accept a treatment that is offered to them. So that is based on this principle of autonomy. What is beneficence and non-maleficence? Beneficence means we all take oath while we are graduating, doing our graduation, while we are completing our course. And beneficence means whatever we do, it should be for the good of the receiver of our service. It can be the need to ask the clients in meeting all their needs. And non-maleficence, even if we don't do good, it should not be harmful. So whatever we do has to be for the benefit of the consumer. At the same time, we are not supposed to do any harm to our clients or cause any harm or injury to our clients whenever we do our actions. Next is justice. Every individual must be treated equally. That is what is called justice. And this requires our attention to. As a human being, as a citizen of India or a citizen of any country, we need justice. So the same way, when a patient comes to us, when we treat them, when they are consumers, they also has justice. Means everyone should be treated equally. There has to be equality in caring for patients. Fidelity means loyalty, means whatever you commit, whatever you say, it has to be done. There has to be a truthfulness, transparency in while dealing with your clients. Now, why are we protected or why are we controlled by these laws? Like we know the teachers in the college or schools, when they are teaching, they don't have a license. They are not provided a license. What is the meaning of a license? Once we complete our course, when we are into the profession, we are controlled or protected at the same time guided by a licensure. Why do we need a license? What happens if we don't have a license? What is the meaning of license? License is license is a authority or a eligibility that gives us, which can help us to engage in a practice of profession to use a particular title. And we all know that we are titled by nurses. Nursing is our title. And this title, the license gives us permission and right to have this title as a nurse. And nursing licensure is mandatory to practice because our profession, our action or inaction can cause harm to the other person or to the public. So definitely it is mandatory that we should be protected or we should be provided a license. Suppose a person who drives a vehicle, we know they also have a license. Without a license, nobody can drive a vehicle. So what does it mean when somebody holds a license, a valid license? What does it mean? It means that a person who drives a vehicle knows what are they doing. They know the right, they know the rules, regulations, what are the traffic rules, what are the signboards that is kept on the roads. So when somebody says that I hold a license or I have a valid license, it means that that person who holds license knows what to do and what not to do. So that makes us mandate to know our profession in depth and practice according to all the legal and ethical principles that we have just heard. So if not, that will invoke actions, legal actions against our government. So there are different kinds of laws. These are few terms that you must know. The types of laws can be criminal laws, it can be civil laws. Criminal means a crime or a mistake that is against the public. It has caused injury and it can be a problem to the public. So it comes under criminal laws. Civil means it can be between persons, it can be between a person or a property, a personal injury or a property. So these such things comes under civil laws. What is the difference? If you are sued under criminal law, it ends up in imprisonment and punishment. Whereas if it is under a civil suit, so it can be managed with compensations. So you know, when it comes under a criminal law, anything that comes under a criminal law cannot be compensated with some compensation. It goes along with imprisonment and such punishment. There is something else called Good Samaritan law. What does it mean? So when we are in the practice, doctors, nurses, some situations comes that sometimes we do something with the goodwill of protecting somebody's life or saving someone's lives. At that time, maybe you don't have an order, you don't have a written instructions to carry out, but you did for the benefit or for saving somebody's life. So in such a case, suppose while doing that act, if a harm happens or if a patient dies or somebody dies and you are sued for that, there is a law which protects you. It is called Good Samaritan law. When it is done, this action is done without taking any price for that or without any personal intention. So you need to prove that it has been done solely for the benefit of the person for whom you have done it. It is not on your own interest or it is with the interest of something else. So in such conditions, the law can protect you under this Good Samaritan law. See, the civil laws, the tort laws, mainly the civil laws are called tort laws. What are the torts? There are three kinds of tort laws. It can be unintentional, it can be intentional, or it can be quasi-intentional. Unintentional, maybe you are doing something. You are not intending a harm to somebody. You are not intending a harm to your patients. You, for some reason, you have just done it without thinking. So that caused a harm. So that will come under unintentional harm. Suppose you know definitely that this will bring harm to the patient, still you are doing it. So then maybe for some reason you are busy in your schedule, you are busy looking after the patient, you somehow you have to finish your job. So with knowing that it may bring harm to your patient, you are doing it. So that is called intentional, and there can be quasi-intentional. Example, invasion of privacy. It is nothing intended to create a harm or cause a harm, but at the same time you know that it should not be done. Invasion of somebody's into someone's personal matters and things like that. So such mistakes will come under this kind of a quasi-intentional torts. There are certain torts which can come under criminal laws in our profession. Few are battery. So what is called battery? When you touch somebody without their permission, that is called battery. So where do we commit batteries? In very simple terms, suppose you are going to catheterize a patient and you are not explaining it and you are not taking permission from that person, or you are going to cannulate a patient and you need to shave few hair of few areas, and without taking any permission, without asking them, without telling them, if you start shaving or if you start doing something, they can always sue you under this as a battery, because you have not taken permission to touch the patient. So without permission, if you touch a patient and if they sue you, it comes under battery. And assault is what? Assault, it can be physical or verbal threat. You need not even assault somebody physically. Even if you threaten someone that you will do something, it will come under this act of assault. An invasion of privacy, very important matter, getting into somebody's personal matters. And sometimes we know patients and their relatives might stand there near the patient and talk something, or you may hear it. And unintentionally or intentionally, you're just talking among your colleagues and conveying the same thing to other people. And this person, the third person who hears it, and if they are also conveying to somebody else. So this is like, you are not supposed to hear it, you are not supposed to look into the personal matters. So one mistake you did it, and second, you are again conveyed to somebody else's. So this is called invasion of privacy. So this can also come under even the criminal act. And false imprisonment, something is called false imprisonment. What is an imprisonment? You are holding somebody against their will, stopping their freedom, not allowing them to move to whichever directions they want. You're stopping the movement in one direction and you are not letting him move. That is called false imprisonment. Where do we come across with this false imprisonment in our profession? As you all know, we are very fast in restraining patients in many situations, and we will have our own justification for restraining. Patient is restless, patient is violent, all that is okay, but that should be the last resort. Restraining should be the last resort that we should adopt, because if it causes some injury, some problem, it can come under this false imprisonment. So that every staff should know how should we imprison a person. Why is a consent very important before restraining a patient in some situations, and what is the validity of a consent, and what actions, preventive actions or protective actions we should undertake while we are restraining a patient. There is something else called malpractice and negligence. Malpractice and negligence. This is also kind of civil tort. Malpractice is a serious kind of negligence. It is the failure of someone to render a professional service, to exercise that degree of skill and learning commonly applied under all the circumstances by the average, prudent, and reputable member of the professional with the result of injury, loss, or damage to the recipient of those services or those entitled to rely upon them. So, negligence is an omission or action or inaction. You're omitting something or you're doing something which is not supposed to be done. So that is called negligence. And malpractice, it is a serious kind of negligence. And how do we differentiate? How do we know whether we have underwent there was a negligence or a malpractice in our while carrying out our service? So there is something called standard of care. So what is a standard of care? A standard of care means there are reasonable degrees of care a person, a learned person, a competent person, or educational person who holds a valid license will do in certain situations or must do in certain situations, typically in a professional or medical setting. So that is what we call a prudent person. So some action or some inactions which a prudent person will do in certain situations. So that is called a standard of care. Who decides the standard of care in nursing profession? So we have various legislative bodies, councils, Nursing Practice Act, all that decides what are the standards of our professions based on the ethics that we have just heard. So I would like to show you few allegations, frequent allegations of nursing negligence or malpractices. Patient safety, we know. So when a patient comes to us, when they rely on our care, so it is our obligation or a liability to ensure the safety of a patient. Liability is what? It is an obligation or a duty. So many of us usually in the nursing practice, nurses think we are just doing something. It is a duty. It is not a duty bound job usually. Liability means what? Suppose we hire, when we take loan or ask somebody for 1,000 rupees. And when that person asks us back that money, it is our legal liability to give that money back. So it is not a free thing. It is not a favor that we are doing. So our service, our job, our duty towards a patient is a legal liability. So when a patient comes to us, it is our legal liability to ensure all kinds of safety to that patient. So when there is a problem in the patient's safety by various ways, like if a patient falls down, if a patient has or acquires some other hospital acquired infections, pressure sore, all these are safety issues which can put us into legal actions. Then monitoring of patients and reporting them in the right time. We know that we all are supposed to be monitoring the patient. The nurses are supposed to be monitoring. So in my clinical settings, we have seen, I have seen many times, the doctors might ask us to monitor the patient 4 hourly or maybe 8 hourly vitals, 8 hourly BP. So our notion, the common notion is that we are supposed to monitor the patient in between 8 hours or only after 8 hours. Actually, it is other way. So the order says you are supposed to monitor the patient at least after 8 hours, minimum of 8 hours. But that doesn't mean that you should not monitor the patient more frequently. If you find something going wrong, if you find there is some other, your monitoring has to be more frequent. And it is not only monitoring, you are supposed to be reporting it in time to the concerned care provider. So lacunae in monitoring and reporting also can cause legal issues in your profession. This is a sign of some problem, negligence that happened in Kasturba Hospital in Mumbai with improper treatment. And medication errors, one of the major error that happens with nursing. You know, the statistics says in states there were 4 lakhs incidents of medication error, but that is it is a part of, it is like an iceberg. Majority of it is underneath and very few only we see. We also know in India, we don't have such good statistics of medication errors. If you take an opportunity of 1,000 administration, there can be at least 10% of medication error, and which is the most dangerous thing that can happen to a patient, and that can put nurses under lawsuits. And other things are like policy procedures. We are inability or not adhering to the policies and procedures or protocols of the institution where you are working. Privacy, providing privacy to the patient and protecting their confidentiality, both comes under this legal actions. Confidentiality, again, as the previous speaker said, the patient may be HIV positive or patient may be HBsAg positive, and you know that person may be your neighbor or maybe your colleague is a neighbor of that patient. Unknowingly or unintentionally, you just convey to that person that this patient is positive, and they convey it to somebody else. So that becomes, and someone else comes to know about this, it becomes a breach of confidentiality of a patient's information, which is a serious mistakes or a negligence or a malpractice that can put you under legal suits. Abandonment. Abandonment, usually no one think of it. What is this abandonment? Termination of a patient care without assuring the continuation of care at the same or higher level in various medical venues. Walking off the duty, leaving the patient without transferring patient to another nurse. See, this has happened when some problems happens. You find that your reliever has not come, you have not informed anybody, or your reliever is late to reach to take over, and you say, it is my duty is over and I'm just leaving. We cannot do that. It comes under abandonment of the patient because they are under our care. It is our duty till the time we are on duty to protect, to ensure the safety and services are rendered in a standard manner. So leaving patient without transferring the care to another person of your level or to a higher level becomes under this abandonment. Now we have seen all these words, laws, torts, civil, criminal. You will think, okay, then how do we practice under all these problems? But then, if somebody has to be, there is few criteria. How do some action or inactions come under negligence or malpractice in the court? How do you establish whether there has been a negligence or a malpractice? So there are 4 elements or criteria to determine whether you have been negligent or there has been a malpractice or there has been an invasion of privacy, there has been a breach of confidentiality. So these are 4 elements or criteria to establish your negligence. The first one is duty. What is a duty? Duty means you are responsible, you are accountable for the care of that patient for certain time, or this patient who complains or who charge a negligence against a nurse had been under the care of a particular nurse against whom, or the plaintiff. So for an example, someone has sued you against a mistake or an action, sued you for a negligence, and if you are not on duty, or maybe that patient was not under your care, so you don't come, this duty factor, this criteria is not established when you are not on duty at that time. So that is why we have various things done, punging, signature, signing in your assignment book, all that is a proof that you were on duty or not on duty. So if you are on duty and this patient is assigned to you, you have a legal liability of duty. Means you are legally obliged to care for this patient. It is not a favor, it is not something else, it is a legal liability to care for this patient, or in other words, it is your legal accountability to ensure deliver standard of care, nursing care, or to this patient. So that is where the duty is established. Then what is breach of duty? Breach means what? So this patient, you were on duty, this patient was assigned to you, and you had a duty of giving injection or administering medication or positioning, whatever it is. So you had all this duty. It was all your accountability to give medicines in time, to position the patient, to see that the patient doesn't fall. It was all under your duty. And by some action or inaction, you have breached. The duty was not done. It was not done. So that is called breach of duty. Sometimes your action can become a breach of duty, or sometimes an inaction also can become a breach of duty. What is that an action can cause a breach of duty? Suppose administration of medication. Some medication was not ordered and you administered medication, or maybe the doctor advised half strength of a medication, but you gave full strength of medication. So something which you were not supposed to do, or you were not supposed to prescribe a medication, you were supposed to administer under the prescription of a medication. So when you do something which beyond the scope of your care, that becomes an action which can cause a breach of duty. Same way, inaction. When a patient is unresponsive, your policy says you are supposed to initiate cord blue or start CPR and things like that for the safety of a patient. So your timely inaction can cause harm to a patient. So that will also come under breach of duty. You assessed a patient and that patient had very high risk of fall. You were supposed to be informing the patient, educating the patient for prevention of fall and ensuring that all safety of the patient so that the patient doesn't fall. But if you fail to do or act in such a person in a standard way that the nursing principles or action tells you to do, then it becomes an inaction which causes a breach of duty. Then next, what next? So you had a duty and the duty was breached either by an action or an inaction, which caused an injury to your client or to your consumer, to a patient who were under your care. So the plaintiff suffered or the complainant suffered an actual injury or a loss. How can a patient sustain a loss? So we have seen many times, or there have been incidences. In my experience, there was an incident of a patient in one of the institution. The patient was unresponsive, comatose, and the nurses who were caring for the patient did not care for the eye which was open. And we all know that a comatose patient cannot close the eyes. So we are supposed to be protecting the eyes with some wet sterile gauze. But somehow the negligence of nurses, they didn't do it, and the patient had to have keratitis and blindness that led to blindness of a patient. So it is such a big loss. Suppose if this person is a breadwinner of a family, imagine what happens. So this kind of an injury, or because of our not reporting timely, non-monitoring timely, that can cause severe loss or injury to the patient. Another example, suppose if a patient comes to you with a plaster of cast applied, and when we all know it is a minor procedure which may usually require not much of monitoring, but at sometimes it can lead to severe serious problems. Suppose if this cast is very tight and we fail to monitor and report the tightness or the loss of supply to that part, that can lead to such compartment syndrome or necrosis of the hand and loss of limb. So such injuries can happen due to our negligence or breach of duty of a nurse. And now the injury has happened. Now what next? The court has to decide, the law has to decide who was the cause for this injury. The causation has to be established under the law in the court. Then only that person can be blamed or for negligence or penalized for negligence. So the breach happened and the breach caused some kind of damage or injury or a loss. So all these 4 factors have to be established to make someone under the Negligence or Malpractice Act. So this is some way a protection for us, some way and other way also. Now these are few cases of negligence, not in our country, in Western country. As I said, in our country, our people are negligence of the laws and protections they have under all these regulations and laws under the article of 21, 19, which states protection for life, protection for dignity, all that. So since they are not aware, many a times we nurses in India don't get very frequent legal suit unless it is a very serious mistake, malpractice, someone dies with some medication errors and things like that. Usually we find in our country the lawsuits are maximum against doctors. So that is not it is not because there are no negligence or malpractices, it is simply because of the ignorance of our population, our people. So these are few cases. Post-surgical nursing care for a patient who underwent routine keyhole surgery, suffered a perforated bladder during surgery, and the poor nursing care she received meant that this went undetected and she developed sepsis and multiple organ failure. So this comes under lack of monitoring and reporting. Failure to observe, again, the failure by a nursing staff to properly observe a man assessed to be at high risk of fall. I just mentioned who got out of bed, fell, suffered hematoma and died. And most of the time, many of the hospitals, accredited hospital, they do fall risk assessment and the nurses know this patient is very high risk for fall, but there is a tendency that they keep it to themselves and they document it, but it is not conveyed to the patient or to their client, to their bystanders, so that they are not aware. Same way, some patients are on antihypertensive, and everyone knows, the nurses knows that this antihypertensive can cause a hypostatic hypotension when a patient gets up immediately after the administration of medicines. But they don't give a health education or instruct the patient not to get up immediately after the administration of medication. So this can cause fall and followed by hematoma or death. The other case is failure to monitor. Failures by nursing staff at Spire Wesley Hospital to monitor act upon a patient's low saturation level following hip surgery seeks medical assistance. Very commonly happens in our place, and these days of corona, we know the patient saturation is an important and critical monitoring factor which needs immediate attention and reporting. So if the nurses fails to monitor the saturation and report in time, that might cause death of a patient or such severe injuries to a patient. These are few case laws So now, as we have seen all this, so now everyone may be thinking, in that case, in such situations, how do we practice? How do we keep ourselves safe and protect us from all these legal suits? Definitely, we can do that. We can protect ourselves under the same laws and ethics that we have learned, we have studied, under the same principle and same laws and the duty and the breach and all that. So how do we, what are the tips to avoid litigations and lawsuits while practicing nursing or caring for a patient? The first one is be persistent. Be present to your patient and know your own strength and weakness. What does it mean? Be present to your patient. When a patient is in need, you should be available. You should be available to monitor. When a patient says something or report something serious, you should be present. You should be available to monitor to that patient. And know your strength and weakness. When a certain job, certain duty is entrusted to us, to a patient, to a nurse, she should know whether she is capable or competent enough to know that, to do that. So she should know the weakness. She should know her strength. She should know that I am able to do it or not. Whether I am trained in this particular thing or I am competent to do such a thing. For an example, if a staff nurse who is posted in a ward or in an ICU and her previous experience was in a ward, but now she is posted in ICU. She had no previous experience of looking after a ventilated patient. Now, if our seniors assign a ventilated patient to the staff nurse, she should be knowing, she should be able to say under these rights that I am not competent enough to take care of a ventilated patient or to manage a ventilated patient. Without telling or informing this, and knowing that she is not competent enough to take care of a ventilated patient, she accepts the responsibility. She becomes accountable for all the problems or errors that can happen due to her negligence or ignorance or unawareness of care that has to be given to a ventilated patient. Get clear orders. Many times in India, especially, our nurses are very fearful to ask a consultant or a physician to get a clarified orders, especially in medications. There are laws, there are rules to regulate the prescriptions. It is said that it has to be written in capitals, it has to be written in generics, all that is there. But many a time, the nurses in our culture or in India are fearful of asking to get more clarification on these prescriptions. So when you are not clear of the orders that is given to us, either in writing or in verbal, whatever way it is, you should not carry it out. Once you carry it out or render or do as per the orders without having a clarity on as to what you're supposed to do, you become accountable for your action. Though the order is given by the physician or the consultant, while you are enacting or acting upon that orders, it becomes ultimately your accountability and legal responsibility for the outcome of your care. So before doing anything or not doing anything, get a clear order from the concerned healthcare provider. Measure twice and dispense once. What does it mean? It is mainly regarding the medication errors. Medication errors are something which can cause criminal negligence, criminal malpractice in a profession that can put you under criminal laws. So, because a medicine that is given, administered wrongly or to a wrong person or to a wrong dose, in a wrong dose, can cause life to someone. So, it is like unintentional murder. It can come under unintentional murder under the Indian Criminal Penal Code section. So that cannot be compensated by anything that will invoke punishment under imprisonment. So dispensing or administering medication, you have to be very, very careful. You have to adhere to all the rights and checks of administration of medication. Because without knowing administering all the medicines, when administered to a wrong patient or in wrong dose, and the wrong medicines can become poisonous to a patient. Once you administer poisons, what happens? The patient dies. So the medicine administration has to be very careful. And not only that, once it is done, there is no way that you can revoke it or take it back. After administration of medication, it is like throwing stones. Once the stone is gone out of your hand, then it is not in your control. So it will definitely affect, or the outcome is unpredictable and you are not able to control it. So giving administration or giving medicine or administering medicines, one has to be very, very careful, adhere all to the 6 rights, documentation, and the 3 checks while administering medications, and explain consent and other information exchanges. Communication is a very important factor to prevent legal litigations in nursing. Many times, many of the errors and problems or issues in the clinical setup happens due to lack of communication or improper communications or absence of communication or misunderstanding between the healthcare providers and the patient. Suppose a patient is going out on discharge and you're supposed to give certain health educations to the patient. You don't inform the patient. For an example, suppose a patient is on some sedatives and the patient goes on discharge. A nurse who is giving the health education is supposed to advise the patient that you are being put on a sedative, and after taking this sedative medicines, you are not supposed to drive, or it will cause sleep or sedation or drowsiness, so that you must not do anything that warrants your attention and concentration. So such information, if not conveyed, if not given to the patient, that patient is ignorant of things and they might land up in troubles or dangers. So such health information and communication is very, very essential to protect you, to save you from legal litigation. Same way, consent, I'll be dealing with it in details in later slides. Then avoid talking shops on social. What does it mean? Like, as I said before, you are talking about your patient's personal matters in public, or airing it in the social medias, in WhatsApp, in Facebook, taking patients' photos, the photos of the document, and is uploading it into some social medias, or you are publicly telling something in front of others which the patient or the client does not want to disclose in front of anybody else. Even say few things can happen in the clinical setup. Maybe some few bystanders are standing near the patients and you are discussing few issues, some problems, which the client does not want others to listen, without noticing that the people who are standing there, the visitors or the bystanders who are not privileged for this communication, without noticing that if you expose or you disclose few incidents, few things, few issues in front of those people, the patient can sue you under this thing, under the breaching of confidentiality of their information. So you have to be very careful not to talk personal matters or patient issues in front of others, in front of public, even when you are in the canteen, when you are in the lift, not even with your colleagues from other departments. So it is a behavioral issues with nurses. Many times they stand in the lift and talk about the patient, or in the cafeteria they talk about the patient. When in the rooms they talk about the patients when they are in a hostel, and all this can cause issues in the put them into legal litigations. Remember to document thoroughly. The most important thing. If not documented, it is not done. So that is the rule. So whatever you might say, whatever you might have done, so it comes null and void if it is not recorded and documented in the patient record. Now, what is a consent? Consent is very essential things while doing a care for your patient. Consent is not more than, it's more than yes or no. Ask, listen, and respect. It is not simply yes or no. There are other factors regarding consent. It is valid, consent become valid only when it is given by the right person, when it is given voluntarily, not under the force. The consent should not be given by somebody's force, and person should be mentally stable and able to, in a capacity to give the decisions. There are different type of consents. There is an informed consent, advanced consent, express consent, implied consent, and surrogate consents. Who can give consent? A simple medical examination, the minimum age of consent is 12 years. Suppose it is not a deep or detailed investigation, then under 12 years a child can give consent. A major diagnostic and therapeutic issues or surgery, the age is above 18 years. Below 18, they are considered as minor, so they cannot give consent. So we are not supposed to take consent a person for a surgery or another things, and someone who is under the age of 18, and the patient should be mentally sound, and he or she should not be under any fear or threat or a false conception. The patient should not be intoxicated or sedated. Means patient not in that mental state to give consent. Incomplete information about the patient's diagnosis, therapeutic plans, etc. is a commission than misconception or omission. So without proper information, without giving all this benefits, risk, and the balance, all that has to be explained after the information, only the patient is supposed to give consent. And there are certain medico-legal issues. People who are staff who are working in casualties or in wards, we usually find cases coming into you as medico-legal cases. What are these medico-legal cases? Medico-legal cases can be defined as a case or injury or ailment, etc., in which investigations by the law enforcing agencies are essential to fix the responsibility regarding the causation of the injury or ailment. In mere terms, it can be the case, the injury, or the death, which is under the investigation of an investigating agency or a police. Examples: suicide, poisoning, homicide, or rape, sexual assault. Now even the snake bite, all this comes under medico-legal cases. So what are the nurses' responsibility of this medico-legal cases? They have to be informing the intimation, raise intimation to the police. Decision of a medico-legal case is by the duty doctor or the medical officer of the casualty, but the nurses are supposed to raise the initiate the intimation and send it to the police or the magistrate. Another important thing, the nurses are not supposed to disclose or give any statement regarding these cases to any social media or to any investigating matters. That accountability or the responsibility belongs to the doctor. They are supposed to be explaining. The nurses are not supposed to give any statement. The same way, the documents, every care that is done, given to a medico-legal case has to be documented in a chronological order, legibly to be signed and dated. And it is a confidential document, and the documents have to be kept under safe custody, which should not be shown to anyone else. And usually we are supposed to put a red seal or a sticker in front of on top of a medico-legal case, so that the file is can be differentiated for legal purposes, and so that everyone will know this is a confidential record. All the records are confidential, but medico-legal records are in detail more confidential. And the same way, when a patient comes to you, you need to take proper history and collect some articles. When they may bring some bottle of poisonous, or sometimes the dresses that is stained by poison or something else. So all this becomes evidence of that crime or a mistake. So whether it is self-inflicted or inflicted by someone else, these becomes the evidence. So all this should not be discarded. Even aspirate from a poisonous person, it should not be discarded. That should be kept or handed over to the police, because that will serve as an evidence. So if you destroy all this, the people who, the hospital or the healthcare providers become part of a crime. For you can be sued for destroying the evidences of the crime. So all this, and suppose a patient, medical legal cases, wants to go on discharge, it has to be intimated to police. There is no question of llama for a medical legal cases. So in the same way, if a medical legal case dies, the dead body cannot be handed over to the bystander. The bystander or the relatives may request you that there is no problem, you can give it to us, but the nurses or the doctors, the institution, we are not supposed to hand over the dead body to the police, to the relatives. It has to be given to the police. So at any circumstances, it should not be handed over to the relatives, because the body has to undergo postmortem and other investigative proceedings, so that it should be handed over to the police. Then medical records, another important factor. So how do we protect ourselves from all these legal matters? The documentation is one of the best thing, or one of the important factor that protects you from this legal litigations. So documentation has to be proper. Every documentation has to be dated, signed, and legible, and in chronological order. So whatever is not done, whatever is done, if it is not documented, it will not be considered as done. And if it is documented, that can protect you and save you from many legal litigations. So, and what are the red flag complaints regarding the documentation, or which can put you into under this malpractice or negligence? Adding or denting the documentation. You have already written, that is why we say it has to be written in chronological order. So if you add something in between, or you try to modify or alter the documentation, so that will become a complaint against you. And if there is no date entry, that is also will not protect you. Date, time, conflicts. You put some date today, and other important documentations comes before a date. So if there is conflicts between date and time, that can also cause problem. Inaccurate information. Documentation, medical documentation, in which whatever you document in a patient file should not be of your opinion. Suppose you find that the patient's vision is going down. You should never state that the patient is blind. You can rather document that the vision is this much, maybe the vision is reducing. So it should not be your opinion. And it should not be blaming somebody. All your documentation has to be only regarding the patients, and it has to be what you observe, and it should not be to blame anyone. It should not be a complaint in the patient documentation. Finally, the medical records belongs to the patient. And destroying records, it is a major crime, a mistake under a criminal tort. So you should not destroy any medical record by any means, by whitening, by blocking it, by tearing it. So you should be very careful in handling this medical record. It is a confidential documentation, and that has to be protected under safe custody. Now we all are licensed, and is there any way that our license are everlasting, or it will continue? Is there any ground whether the license can be revoked? There are incompetent nursing practices. There are few grounds where the license can be revoked. Incompetent nursing practices means you are not practicing as per the standard, or you are incompetent, you do not know, you are not aware or knowledgeable for what you are doing. Professional misconduct, like acting or doing or practicing under intoxication, under the effect of some drugs, or such things can revoke the license. Conviction of a crime while on duty can also revoke your license. So once your license, you need to protect the license also. So ignorance of the law is not an excuse, and violators of law can't escape penalty and punishment. If it is a crime, it comes with punishment and imprisonment. If it is under civil law, it has to be penalty in terms of financial compensation most of the time. So if a person under your care, under your negligence, undergoes negligence causes injury or loss, so the compensation can be according to the court says. Suppose if a person of 30 years lose the limb, not able to work anymore, earning a salary of 30,000, the court will calculate the salary, monthly salary of 30,000, another 30 years, and the interest. So the Consumer Protection Act or the court will say the compensation is that much. So it becomes a major big event or a big problem. It can be a problem to every licensed professional. So ignorance of law cannot be an excuse. So we need to be aware of what are the laws and regulations and ethics that we are under, and how our profession is regulated, and how can we protect ourselves from undergoing such legal litigations in our professions. Thank you so much for patient listening. Is there any question?
And thank you, ma'am, for your excellent session. Ma'am, some queries have been mentioned over here in the chat box. Ma'am, may I just explain that, ma'am? Ma'am, one of the question was explanation over the types of consent.
Yeah. Okay, informed consent. Informed consent is a consent that you explain everything. You are explaining the risk and the benefit and the patient. Informed means the patient is aware of what is they are saying. Like if I am giving consent to a surgery, it has to be an informed consent. Though the patient has to know. Suppose if I'm giving a consent to a surgery, I must know what are the risks involved in it. And I must know what happens if a surgery is not done, the benefit over the risk. So understanding all this, I am giving a consent. That is the informed consent. Means the patient or the client needs to be informed or aware of what is supposed to be happening to the patient. That is an informed consent. And other consent is surrogate consent. Suppose if a minor, some injury or a death happens of a minor, the parents or the guardian gives consent for that. That is called a surrogate consent. Then other consent is informal consent. Informal can be for every procedure that a nurse do on a patient or every care. The nurse is supposed to take a consent. That can be verbal or written. So suppose I am starting a cannula, a nurse starting a cannula, the patient has to, the nurse has to explain what she's going to do, whether there will be pain, whether there will be a problem, and the patient give consent informally that by showing the, nodding the head or saying okay, yes, or by verbally or some expression, so that you can go ahead and do it. Such a consent is called informal consent. And every action of a nurse has to be with this consent. You cannot do anything without taking the consent or willingness of a client. So that is called an informed consent or informal consent. And same way, express consent also. They are expressing, okay, you can do it. So that is an express consent.
Madam, some more questions are also there. Ma'am, many a times we perform non-nursing duties also. So what if we perform such duties and if it ends up in a problem?
Non-clinical duties. Non-clinical duty. What do they mean by that? Can there be more
yes,
clarity?
non-nursing duties means non-clinical. Yes, ma'am. That's what they have mentioned.
So if it is dealing with a patient care, if it is related to the care of a patient, it has to be under their scope, under the scope of nursing practice. Then there is no issue. Then they will come under the obligation. Suppose if a doctor is saying verbally, do some procedure which a nurse is not supposed to do, or even the senior is telling do something which is not under their scope. Suppose jugular vein, like many of the nurses know many procedure, they will be able to do it also. But are they privileged to do it? For that, you have to be privileged. In all the accredited institutions, all the nurses are privileged for certain things. So they are supposed to do things only for their privilege. They are not supposed to do anything that is not privileged. So if somebody tells you start an EJV, for which they are not privileged, they should definitely refuse that I am not privileged for it, so I will not do it. And still they do it, though they know doing it. If they do it, it will come under malpractice because that is not in their scope. So whatever we do, we are only supposed to do, the nurses are supposed to do only in their scope of practice, which is authorized by the license and the council, Nursing Councils Practice Act, not anything other than that. So here, when I say this, even we, most of the nurses, we delegate duties to others, to your juniors, to your students, to attenders, and many people. So delegation also, one has to be very careful. When a job is delegated to somebody, the partial responsibility belongs to the person who delegate the job. Suppose you are delegating, a nurse is delegating a job to a junior girl or to a student who is not authorized to do. Maybe that person may be knowing it, and a harm happens, an injury happened to the client, or a mistake happens, an error happened to the patient. Then the person who delegated this job becomes responsible for the outcome of the care that has been done. So this is called a vicarious responsibility or a vicarious liability of a senior, because a person who is delegating become vicariously liable for the action or the outcome of that person who has done the job. So partially that is what, when the students are there in the clinical area, the nurses, registered nurses who delegate their job has to be very careful, and the students, when they do it, it has to be under the supervision of a registered nurse, because the responsibility belongs to the nurse who is a licensed person. Unlicensed, so far till the time they are not licensed, they are not authorized to do. So that is it becomes a vicarious responsibility.
One more question, ma'am.
Yeah.
Due to some of the institutional constraints, like if they are lacking of some supplies in the institution, will it end up in a negligence, or are we legally protected?
We are legally protected if it is escalated in time. Suppose you don't have resources to do the things in the right way, or somebody is asking you to do in an unsterile way, or repeat things. You have all right to refuse it. Under the law, you are protected. But if you don't, I will tell you of examples. Suppose some equipments, infusion pumps, or other ventilators, or BiPAP machines, or your monitoring equipments, which is not working properly. You know that it is showing error, but you are scared. You are scared to tell your seniors. You are scared to report it, or you forgot to report it. You did not notice it. And if you use such an equipment and the harm happens to the patient, it becomes the accountability of the nurse, to the registered nurse. Whereas if she reports and she refuses that I will not use it because it is wrong, then she is safe. So escalation is very important. Once it is escalated to your seniors and to the management, then you are protected under, and it has to be documented. It is not simple verbal documentation, verbal escalation. It has to be documented, given in writing, complaint has to be raised. Then it becomes a vicarious responsibility of the management and the seniors who is delegating the job to you. So all these rules and regulations are there to protect the nurses also. It is not only for litigation. Why all this are told, and these terms and these things, the nurses should know also that there are laws, there are rules and regulations. These are to protect everyone. Why the laws and rules are made? It is the protection of the public. It is the protection of the individual. unless there are rules and regulations, we know it will be all havoc will happen, because how will we then protect it? How will the justice of somebody will be protected? So as the patients are protected by the same rules and laws, even the professionals are also protected. So once you are within the scope of your job or your action, your nurse practice act and your liabilities, you do it and there is no harm, you will always be protected. But the same thing will come into action for your protection also. Like Sindhu says, when something goes wrong, the nurse must know under what rules and regulations you are being protected. So if somebody blames, somebody sue you in the court, there is a lawsuit saying that this is a negligence of a nurse. So if you have done within your limits and according to the standard of your practice, in a standard, proper standard, as any other competent and a prudent nurse will do, and it is documented properly, then that itself is enough to protect you from this legal litigation.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your excellent session, ma'am. The feedback form is available in the chat box. I request all participants to fill in the form, and a need certificate will be available to you via email. A grateful heart is a magnet for miracles. When you are thankful for what you have, you are always rewarded with more. Thankfulness is the quickest path to joy. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of all those who have made this event a cherishable one. I now invite Ms. Arya Dinesh, second year MSc Nursing student, to propose vote of thanks. Over to you, Arya.
A very good afternoon to one and all. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion to all the dignitaries assembled here. Words may not be capable of communicating our sense of gratitude for this fabulous talk on ethical and legal issues in nursing by the resource person, Major Beena CA, Chief Nursing Officer, Baby Memorial Hospital, Kozhikode, who honored this function with her informative and inspirational thoughts. Thank you, ma'am. I would like to thank our beloved chairman, Sri K. Shashidharan sir, Kerala Hospital Federation, for providing us with all the facilities for making this webinar a grand success. Thank you, sir. An event of this dimension cannot happen overnight. I cannot thank enough to our beloved principal, Chief Organizer, Dr. Swapna Jose, College of Nursing Talasheri, for her involvement and willingness to take on the completion of the task. Thank you, ma'am. I take this opportunity to thank our Vice Principal and Class Coordinator, Mrs. Sajna PV, Professor, College of Nursing Talasheri, for providing us with ample time to coordinate this event. Thank you, ma'am. I thank Ms. Sindhu K. Matthew, Assistant Professor, College of Nursing Talasheri, for presenting the overview of the topic today. I take this opportunity to thank Mrs. Manjula Casey, Associate Professor, and Mr. Akhil US, Assistant Professor, College of Nursing Talasheri, for their continuous support throughout for organizing the CNE. Without their help, we couldn't have made this come true. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. I thank all faculty and non-teaching staff who have helped us to make this event a success. A special word of thanks to our first year coordinator, Mrs. Sindhu K, HOD, Obstetrics and Gynecology Department, and Mrs. Meena K, Faculty, Obstetrics and Gynecology Department, for helping us to find apt resource person and making this happen. Thank you, madams. I thank all the delegates who attended the webinar. Hope this has caused a change in our outlook to the professional standards. Thank you all who are present and helped us to make this happen. Hope we will meet up soon for another webinar. Thank you.
Thank you all. With this, we come to the end of the webinar session. Thank you.